Today I'm going to be speaking about employer branding specifically from the context of a digital, social, and increasingly mobile, interconnected world. When we look at, when we think about becoming an employer of choice in a competitive, crowded marketplace, it is important to consider really the recruiting landscape and how it is evolving before we delve into why it is important to build a powerful employer brand, and more importantly, how to transform it so that we can meet the recruiting challenges that we are facing when hiring the best talent today and in the future. In looking at the recruiting landscape, I thought that it was interesting to focus on a few critical aspects. The first one is really that the size of the talent pool is shrinking. And in fact, despite high level of youth unemployment caused by the last recession, the underlying trends is that unemployment rates are declining. And this is driven by long-term demographics across all of the major developed economies, which are creating a gap between the demand of labor and the supply of labor. According to Rainer Strack, who is the global leader of the human resourcing practice at Boston Consulting Group, if you take Germany as an example, Germany will be facing, over the next 15 years, dramatic labor shortage, especially if Germany wants to continue to grow domestic product by 1.7 to 2% over the next 15 years. The people they will need to be able to produce those goods simply are not going to be there. And in fact, they're going to be facing a workforce gap of 20% of their entire workforce by 2030. So basically what this all means, it means that companies, like all of the people here in this room, will have to compete even more fiercely to reach the talent that they want. And the war for talent will be escalating across the world. So if the talent pool is shrinking, it is even more important to understand where is the talent looking. And certainly finding talent has changed dramatically over the last 5 years. Active seekers are still predominantly gravitating towards traditional job boards. In fact, according to the latest online recruiting survey of LinkedIn, job boards are the #1 source for hire in volume and quality. But social networks like Facebook, like Twitter, are becoming extremely effective talent engagement platforms. Just to mention that there are more than 60,000 jobs published every day on Twitter. And social job ads, programmatically distributed on social networks, are becoming more and more effective. This is also driven by a shift of engagement from the desktop to the mobile and the smartphones. It's not surprised, therefore, that we are seeing pure mobile recruiting models and applications emerging across the world at the speed of light. Jobbar, Switch, Apploy, Kudos, Job and Talent, Job Today, and many, many more. And here is where you can engage from the beginning of the talent engagement cycle to the end with the transaction, the application, completely on mobile. This is because of the new generation of seekers who are coming, very comfortable with mobile, but also these are people who have high propensity in sharing their own views, their own experiences, in providing a rating, a scoring as an employee of their employer. This is why new platforms like Kununu in Germany or like Glassdoor are emerging. Even the passive job seeker is becoming more and more visible. And this is because technologies like TalentBean are able to aggregate your talent social profile by leveraging talent bits that you have left in the open social web. So what all of this means? It means that the ecosystem has become much more complex, the audience is fragmenting, and you need a more integrated communication strategy digitally across the ecosystem to drive your employer branding. And also it means that the job seekers, although they have more access to information than ever before, they're not less discerning with regard to the employer they want to engage. Speaking, therefore, about the audience that you want to reach is also very important. And this is the next element of the trends, is really by looking at the workforce. If we look at the workforce, how it's changing over the next 10, 15 years, one overwhelming trend is emerging. The millennial generation will soon be the majority of the workforce. And millennials really think in a different way. They do not hate their jobs. They do not relate to the concept of work-life balance. They are at the beginning of their career. They want to work hard. They have a very clear confine between work and life. They're always on. They want to progress. They really relate to culture, to reputation, to empathy with that organization. They don't want to sift through an aggregator thousands of jobs. They want targeted messaging. This is what they've been used since they were a kid. Targeted messages, bespoke, customized to them. So this is also important to understand how this new generation is really living and behaving in their own lives, in the world around them. And the fact that there is a shift in the economy, well eloquently explained by Jeremy Rifkin, about a new collaborative common economy. In a new collaborative common economy, there is a new generation, a generation of prosumers, people who are consumers, but proactive in designing and customizing their own products for their own needs. It's a generation of reviewers. People are really excited about sharing their emotion, their experiences, rating and scoring. And it's a generation that expects a high level of immediacy and transparency. Now, it's important to take in consideration these key trends in the recruiting landscape when we ask ourselves why it is important to build a powerful employer brand. And it's important because according to research that Monster has done in cooperation with Career Crossroads, 75% of all job seekers who are applying to a job are really doing their own research. 70% of them are searching for jobs for more than an hour, and a third is spending 3 hours or more searching information about the employers to whom they are applying. Bear in mind that today, the information about your company are proliferating on the internet. There has never been more information about you as an employer on the digital ecosystem. And consider that what your employees are saying about you is the ground for research of what the candidates will use when they apply to your jobs. Also very interesting is to take in consideration the candidate experience when they're applying to a job. Based on the same research, we know that candidates are really not afraid of sharing their experiences when they apply to a job, whether it's positive or whether it's negative, as shown on the chart. More importantly, apparently 77% of them will be very comfortable in proactively discouraging someone to applying to a job if they had a negative candidate experience. And 44% of them would be willing to change the status as a customer. And here is where the corporate brand and the employer brand, they're coming together. Your candidates are also your customers, are your consumers. When you think about candidate experience, think about that based on the latest survey, more than 50% of candidates are not receiving any feedback when they apply to a job. I think that is unforgivable considering the level and sophistication of technology we have today with messaging, emails, and big data. Also, very important, 96% of all seekers who are applying to a job will be influenced by what your employees are saying about you as an employer. And 93% will be willing to leave their jobs and apply to a new company if they thought that the reputation of that company was excellent. A good example about employer reputation is a recent experiment done at Virgin Group. Very recently in London, they held a corporate day. What is a corporate day? Is a day in which they ask their employees to behave in the way many traditional firms will expect their employees to behave. Just for one day, Therefore, they have to come to the office dressed in formal business attire, not later than 9 a.m., use the title of Miss and Mrs., do not use social media, do not make personal calls. At the end of the day, Richard Branson said, it was an awful experience. And in fact, he said all employees hated it. But he said it was a great experiment because he wanted to give a taste to his employee of how a lot of the world out there is still run. You can imagine how this has been fantastic PR from an employer branding standpoint, and is a way of leveraging then employee advocacy to really propagate your brand across the digital ecosystem. This leads well into the next and final part of my presentation. It is like, how should you transform your employer brand to really meet today's challenges in the marketplace? A 5-point plan is recommended. The first one, develop a social talent brand which truly reflects your business, your culture, and is propagated across all your communication channels. Second, really scale the brand, leveraging employee advocacy. One employee can amplify your brand across the globe, just like the picture on the screen is showing. Third, think like a marketeer. The fact that you have great jobs doesn't mean that you don't have to work hard to sell them. Fourth, really think about an integrated digital strategy. Think about mobile. What is the mobile experience? Think about social. Because it's very important, number 5, that your talent brand is visible where your audience is, and that you differentiate yourself from the competition. This 5-point plan really needs to come together as an integrated communication digital strategy, which considers different channels, but also considers the entire life cycle of the talent engagement. So from the attraction to the conversion to the call to action. Your employer brand has to be emotional, deliver the values of your culture, to be empathetic, but also needs to have a call to action. They expect to be able to do something and to apply to a job. And then obviously you need to have the measurements so that you can calculate return on investment. If you're targeting the millennial generation, they expect you to be on social. But they expect also you to develop content on social that is engaging their interest. They're expecting them to be targeted with customized targeting, and they're expecting to have a call to action so that they can take action and apply to a job. So ultimately, when you look at the best practices, are really about focus on your efforts, customize your content, promote the engagement, leverage your employees, analyze when is the best time to distribute content. And the don'ts is more about the fact that to develop a powerful social talent brand, there are no shortcuts. If you think that you can just distribute generic content in an untargeted way across the social ecosystem, you'll actually risk of achieving the opposite, that is disengaging the audiences and hurt your employer brand. And ultimately, when you think about the return on the investment, there is plenty of surveys from different research bureaus who are showing that you are going to reduce your time for hire by 34%. You're going to dramatically increase the quality of the candidates. You're going to leverage more employer referrals. If you think about the payroll and people in any company, is probably one of the biggest cost items in the operating expenses. The ability of being more cost efficient in attracting, retaining, and engaging talent by using your employer brand, by leveraging your employees, will add phenomenal value to your bottom line and return incredible value to your shareholders. With that, I would like to leave you with a few closing thoughts, which is when you think about your employer brand, think about the millennial audience, think about social, think about their mobile experience, think about giving them a call to action, and more importantly, how to calculate and evaluate and improve the return on investment. Thank you very much, and have a good day.
That's right. Thanks, Andrea. Cheers. Thanks. Take a seat there. Thanks, Andrea. That was very insightful. Just one or two things just jump out of me straight away before we introduce the panel. Immediately, this is a heart and minds play with purpose. So it's a much more holistic, a very different strategy to a traditional marketing branding strategy. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. Yes, and I'd like to use Monster as an example. I think we are lucky enough that we have our noble purpose, our corporate brand, and our employer brand, which they're kind of overlapping because of the nature of the work we're doing. You know, our noble purpose is to inspire people to improve their lives through the world of work, and our corporate brand claim is find better, so help people to find better.
Yeah.
And therefore, our employer brand is when people are coming to work for Monster, they know that beyond the career, the progression, the remuneration, and everything, they are doing something that makes a difference out there. Someone will find a job because of what they've done. And I think that's a fantastic return who goes beyond, and it can be integrated in your values.
But it needs to be sold, it needs to be articulated on the right frequency.
Yes.
Got it. Look, I'm really excited by this panel today, I have to say. Like the brands we have, themselves as employers, there's a number of different kind of lenses here. I'm just trying to understand the complexity, even looking at the guys, right? So we have really exciting brands who are standalone, exciting employers with super, super exciting cultures. And also, I've just discovered today that all of you are actually enablers for companies to articulate their employer brand. And I wasn't aware of the full extent of that until I spoke to James shortly. So just introduce James. So James Sherritt is Canadian and heads up Slack across Europe. So I moved here last April, was it?
That's right.
James, and I bump into James nearly every Sunday walking with the kids in Ranelagh, and kind of friends now, I guess, you know. I can't say we're not now because I've just said it publicly. But a particularly exciting company, Slack. So for those who haven't experienced Slack, so you might tell us what it's about, but it was founded by Stuart Butterfield. Yeah? Butterfield, sorry. So he was the founder of Flickr. And then they went on to set up a gaming company. And one of the tools and the apps that they produced ultimately became the product of the organization. So would you give us a sense of the scale of Slack and your presence in Ireland, James?
Sure. So Slack launched a little over 2 years ago. We just had our second anniversary party, and we now have 2.4 million daily users. And we think about daily active users, those are people who are logged into Slack and using it actively for 2 to 2.5 hours a day. And when you walk through an office where a team or an organization has adopted Slack, you almost always see the same thing, which is they have Slack open and the thing they do for their job. So that could be Word if they're a lawyer, that could be an IDE if they're a coder, that could be Photoshop or Illustrator if they're a designer. But Slack is the thing that connects them to their teammates and their tools.
The fastest growing business app in the world?
So far.
You've generated a lot of excitement around the brand, like as an employer. What works particularly well, or what is the magic of that, James?
I think we had a very clear idea about the kind of company that we wanted to build right from the beginning. And it was built on, and to say that, people often think about like technology startups as like, 3 23-year-olds in a basement or a garage traditionally. And that's not Slack. Slack's actually, the 4 co-founders are all like well advanced in their career. They're in their 40s, have kids and families and stuff like that. So we were always trying to build sort of purposefully a brand and a company that supported all kinds of different people at different stages in life, inclusive of people who had kids and lives that were rich outside of work. And so we kind of have a mantra, which is come to work hard, go home. And the values and the purpose of the company sort of align with that.
Very good. Sorry I couldn't make the anniversary party. I wasn't invited. I'm only kidding. So Geraldine Finn heads up the recruitment and HR activity in Twitter's EMEA HQ here in Dublin. So you're very welcome. So it needs no introduction, I guess. But in terms of your length of time in Ireland, you're probably here a little bit longer than the rest of the guys, excluding Monster.
Yeah, that's right. We opened our EMEA HQ in Dublin in late 2011. But we've grown that employee population now to 220 people across 20 distinctly and diverse business units here in Dublin. Across EMEA, our population now is well in excess of 500. So, yeah.
Very good. And in terms of the scale, like it was explosive growth to begin with, like, and I think that was part of the adventure for a lot of the people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess further to that, like globally, we've about 3,900 people now across 35 locations. But despite that growth, it's still a company of less than 4,000 people, offering an opportunity to make a real positive personal impact at a company with a brand that's truly global and well known. Yeah.
And talking about purpose, I think the ultimate purpose, if you look at the impact Twitter has had socially, globally, it's quite phenomenal.
Yeah, and couldn't agree more with a lot of what you said earlier on. So important to look at purpose, I think, on two levels. One, at that higher purpose level, what Twitter does, we play a very important role. It's the most important communication tool in the world now. People want to hear about what's going on and evolving, and as it happens live, they go to Twitter and read about it 10 to 15 minutes before they'll hear about it anywhere else. And you know, our mission is all around making a difference by giving a voice to people globally, allowing them the opportunity and the freedom to create and share ideas instantly without any barriers. I think that's hugely important, and it's something that's very easy for people to connect with in terms of that purpose of the company as a whole. But it's also really important to be conscious of, you know, purpose at an individualistic level as well. And I think we're at a point now in our evolution that that's really important for us, and that we're, you know, here a little bit longer now. And it's about more than just that higher level purpose engagement, but, you know, what are we doing to help people achieve their personal purpose through work, how they develop and progress and make a difference for their personal life as well as part of the company.
Yeah. Well said. Lauren, you're very welcome as well. So Lauren Wright is Director of EMEA for Glassdoor, so probably the newest company to come, certainly of this group to come to Dublin, set up beginning of this year?
Yep, February 1st, so...
You're very welcome. You're very welcome.
We're just about to embark on this journey.
So I guess Glassdoor, again, is another phenomenal company who's gone through and had a massive impact and removed a huge amount of taboos, certainly in our world, in the recruitment world and in the talent world. And a lot of people refer to the TripAdvisor of employment, I guess, you know. You could tell us a bit about kind of what you guys do, and again, probably a bit more an insight into your organization and your purpose.
Sure. Well, we started about nearly 8 years ago in our California headquarters, and the purpose of the company is really to help people everywhere find jobs in companies they love. So this purpose of loving your job, to really be happy, has been unique to our culture. So we have a very playful culture. We have a culture. We also really drive a feedback-rich environment. So obviously, our site has a lot of reviews and feedback, so we're very aligned with that. To your point earlier, there's a lot of cross-pollination between our consumer brand and our employer brand.
Just to move it into, I guess, the point of this discussion, so the voice of employee, yeah. So you guys are a facilitator of that exact point, yeah. So if I look at the newer world of employer branding, and very much to what you spoke about, Andrea, what we witness and what we experience is that there's different points within the recruitment process where the employer brand needs to be articulated, and it's a constant message. Tiered on top, there's now generations of impact. And let me just give you an example. So if we're, say, targeting somebody, and probably 90% of people we'd place in jobs are effectively headhunted, they're busy being successful, they need to be attracted. And it needs to be a story and a narrative built around the opportunity, the purpose, the culture, and there's probably 3 or 4 different kind of layers of context to that discussion. Then they go and then they do their own research, as you said, and try to use all your platforms, and they do a lot of research and get a sense of other people's experience in that organization. So with that being a emerging trend, ultimately the employee engagement, like it's tiered, isn't it? It's not just a brand, how you present it, how you think it is. It needs to be authentic. It needs to reflect the true values and true experiences of people in the organization. Andrea, I'll come to you. With that complexity in mind, what can companies do to reflect the authenticity of their employer brand?
I think that you want to have authenticity, so you want to have the opportunity for every individual in his own uniqueness, because we are all unique and different, to be able to express himself and to develop. At the same time, we have to be conscious that a very large company also needs to have consistent values and consistent, communication and consistent, kind of establish this is the way we want our people to behave, this is the way, the culture, this is the way we want the people to work together. So how do you bring the two together? And my view, one of the best way of bringing these two together is when you constantly allow your employees to contribute to those values. And those values are not, kind of sterile values they're like set in stone and nobody can ever change it, but they're values that as long as they continue to evolve with time and you allow your people to contribute to them, so allow them to review the mission, review the vision, contribute to the values. Now, in that process of contribution, then you're gonna have something that people truly believe. And the people truly believe, then I think you need to give them the platform on how can they express themselves. And that is where I think also the company can do a lot in providing those opportunities and the platform. I'll give you an example, and this is just a small example. I always thought there was a great mission of our company that was to really inspire people to improve their lives, and obviously the world of work is one of them. And I had the opportunity at a conference, just the speaker after me was a guy who is providing help wanted online, and is anonymous. Of course, now more people they know. I'm not going to say his name, of course. And I thought, really, what an amazing story. This person who wants to do good and is willing to help anyone in any way, of course, within his means and within his ability. And therefore, I went back to the office and I said, why don't we link and we give the opportunity to our people to do good? And in doing good, one of the things we're going to be providing as an experiment is we're going to allow people to take more days off, if they use some of those days, to go to underprivileged schools and talk about the world of work to kids who are going into the workplace. And that is a way, for example, to allowing people to really kind of express themselves, express the values of the company, and do something good in society. But obviously, they're not obliged, only if they want.
Yeah.
And there are many ways, I think, where you can use then your employees and your brand. Then you need to think about those kids who are coming out of school. They're going to be kind of like engaged by the Monster brand, but they're also being engaged by that individual brand. So then your personal individual brand becomes, a vehicle for your employer brand, which then becomes a vehicle for your consumer brand. And that is where you can bring it all together.
It's alignment of values for all communities. Very good. So expression. So Glassdoor is that. It's the ultimate, as is Twitter. They are two of the most used vehicles for that expression. Can you talk us through maybe, Lauren, like how does it work? Say the mechanics of it. Like I heard yesterday was talking about last night. In fact, I talked about different filters of the content is filtered. It goes through a filter system before it's published. How does that work, and how can that, again, real expression of an employee's experience, ultimately feature on the platform?
Sure. Well, when we launched the site, we knew we were getting into a sensitive space. Reviews already existed in the consumer marketplace with Amazon, but we also needed to be very sensitive to ensure that our data integrity was very strong, so we didn't have just a sort of dumping ground for someone's bad day at work. Yeah. And so we designed the site in a way where you have to become a member of our community. And when you do that, we ask you to give back to the community. We call it a give to get model, so that you're really helping somebody else make a better decision about one of probably the most important decisions you'll make in your career. And to your point, we have a content team that actually vets those reviews. So by design, we actually have that content team in Ohio. Our head office is in the San Francisco Bay Area. Unfortunately, Ohio is not quite as nice as San Francisco, but that is their job. Every day they go through the reviews. There's a technical tier, and then there's actually a human touch. So we allow employers to flag reviews to ensure that they also have a voice in this platform of expression.
And being the moral compass of the employer brand, if you want to call it that. So what do you guys do in Glassdoor to reflect your brand?
Yeah, well, we try very hard to ensure that we have, like I said, a feedback-rich environment, and that means that we're encouraging our employees, and I think to your earlier question, engagement really starts with the employer. It's how you listen. It's how you, if you're listening to really learn from your employees when you have all this feedback, how you act upon that is critical. It's not just to get advocates out there and improve scores. It's really about to improve your organization and understand individuals. So we try to do that. We actually have EQ training in our organization. So we try to actually remove as many corporate words as we can and be human and learn about one another in our lives and what impacts us. And it doesn't mean that we're all sitting there, hugging and crying in a circle, but we really try to, apply a human touch to work, because there is such a crossover between your personal life and your work, and you have to understand teams and deal with conflict by understanding people.
I think you're on the money. I think you're moving into something that probably feeds into my next question, Geraldine, which I'll give to you. So, with the purpose that Twitter has, how do you align the function, obviously with the experience of the employee in mind, and how that ultimately is articulated and transcended to potential talent? How do you align the function, so the cog of what somebody does, the question of what they do, with the question of why they do it?
Yeah, so I don't think I'm going to say anything incredibly new to anyone on this topic. It really is about open, transparent communication and making sure that people fully understand that purpose and fully understand how their role impacts on the delivery and realization of that purpose. And that's one of the things that really stands out about the culture at Twitter, the level to which we take transparency and communication, from daily updates, literally from our CEO about what we're doing, weekly updates from our entire executive staff, fully transparent about the things we're working on. Regular restatement of, if this is our purpose, how are we getting there? What are the key tenets of that delivery? And how are we aligning all of our groups under that for delivery? And ultimately, I think that's the critically most important thing for us to do. We communicate very openly internally. It's very open and transparent. And that reflects perfectly our higher purpose and what we do as a company, which is, again, trying to give people a voice to share and create those ideas and remove all those barriers. So I think that's the key thing. I will say that, when I think about the EVP and having that alignment internally, that's important for the delivery of purpose. But I think you got to start at a place of information first and understanding. So one of the big things we've done over the last 12 to 18 months is try to get live information and a sense of temperature with our people all the time. So instead of these, focal point employee surveys, an always on cycle of information that is two-way. So from our leaders out, but also from our employees in, so that we're always aware of what our employer brand is relative to what we think it is, and that we're adjusting course as we go to make sure that that gap doesn't widen.
I think that is the transformation, that it traditionally was what an employer thought they should be, not what they are. Yeah. I think that feeds into retention, that feeds into bad experience, ultimately. And with the heat on talent right now, it's not just at the very beginning of that point how the opportunity is articulated, but as the head comes turned and 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 different opportunities, they merge. And Dublin is quite an exciting space right now. A lot of really cool companies with great stories, great growth. Like, all of a sudden, the narrative and that proposition needs to be re-articulated and reinforced, and it can't be stressed. I think the tendency could be is for you to position yourself to be more exciting than the next company. And again, it's very hard to stand out. And I think there's something here around frequency, so targeting people on the right frequency. And given that all of our employees are publishers of our employer branding content, they they publish it on their phone. It's their experience, it's visual, it's instant. Like, there's something in that I think we have a responsibility as employers to allow them to do it. I think that's obviously a given, but B, to reflect the authenticity, and again, that the people see it for what it really is. And that brings me to you, James, in terms of culture. I think culture is ultimately what will attract talent, particularly millennials. And it's a very hard thing to articulate. So if culture is the output of values and behaviours that's driven by purpose, how would you describe the culture in Slack, and what do you guys do differently to stand out in a crowded marketplace?
That's a good question. I don't know if sometimes I feel like I'm a good person to describe it, sometimes I feel like I'm not, just because like there's the old joke about like, you know, the two young fish swimming through the water and saying to the old fish, "What's water?" Right? So I feel like I've been at the company long enough. I don't necessarily recognize the culture, but for us, and listening to Andreas speaking a little earlier, like one of the things that we try and do is simplify both internally and externally. And so like our company mission is to make your working life simpler, more pleasant, and more productive. And that has an external face to customers with the product that we have and the experience that we provide, and internally as well. And so we just try and keep focusing on those few things and then drive those into specific actions for employees. So for example, we have 6 values. One of the values is thriving. And so one of the ways that we make that material for employees is we have a childminder reimbursement. So for parents, go out for a date, hire a childminder, and Slack will reimburse you for that.
Cool.
Up to, I don't know, I think it's 500 euros a year or something like that. So we'll have a double date sometime. But seriously, I think it is about making it tangible for employees and making it simpler, because it's always difficult to try and think about all the things in your job and then like actually the organization that you're working on and how you express the values of that organization in your day-to-day work. And so the simpler you can make that for employees, I think the better. Also, the more examples that you can provide to them of what to emulate, how you make sort of those values into material things for them. So one of the other initiatives that, and I'm just harping on about parent stuff here now, one of the other initiatives that we think is really important is providing the right parental leave, whether it's a father or a mother, that really supports people having successful families. The third example that I would point to in terms of like just reaching back to sort of diversity and inclusion is we started measuring that very early in our life cycle and publishing that publicly, because what gets measured gets managed. But I think the hiring part of it is only, a portion of it. Actually, the most important part of it is retention of diverse people in your workspace, because what you find in technology is lots of people hire in diversity, but the diversity doesn't stay. It doesn't progress through the organization. So we're focused as much on that second part of progressing diverse people and being inclusionary to managerial positions, to positions of power, to individual contributor positions, whatever it happens to be.
And so much so that you've introduced a new initiative recently, and this was what I learned this morning about Slack at work. What is that, James? We
found that, actually this was quite early on, customers were putting in their job descriptions, excellent compensation, benefits program. We use Slack at work as like a perk of joining that company. And so we just kind of clued into that and said, well, maybe we can help them find great people. And so we created a site called Slack at Work for Slack customers to post their jobs for free. And we have a terrific success of people using Slack as sort of a filter of the kind of company that they want to work at.
I think that's like becoming like a brand associated with the product, like a vacuum becoming the Hoover, that someone's going to use your brand as a benefit or a perk at work. That's really cool. And you've gone through growth over the last year, and I know part of your, obviously the adventure and the attraction is that growth. Yeah. If I bring it to you, Geraldine, you guys are slightly longer here. And I know in the early days for Twitter, to know Michelle and other of your existing and ex-colleagues, that the growth was phenomenal in the early days. As that acceleration has slowed somewhat, which it naturally does, how have you re-articulated that opportunity, and how is that reflected in the employer brand? Because it's changing, right?
Yeah, and I think it's that whole concept of live. An EVP, as it exists, is live, and you've got to constantly check in with it. And it's not, we talk about focus on millennials, whatever. We actually have to really start there, but focus on all of the diverse types of people and profiles who will work with you. So you almost need a 3D model of what that EVP is. And you need to understand that people who join you in really high growth periods, and it's that, go entrepreneurial drive period, have differing needs and purpose to fulfill at different stages of their time with you. So for us over time, I guess, it's about now moving to a culture in which our employees are empowered to lead their own development, their own progress, to actively feed into what we're doing through feedback, pulse, but not just talk rhetoric about that. Give them the tools and the autonomy to lead that, not to be dependent on anyone else, but really lead that. And that's been a massive focus for us over the last 18 months to 24. Just giving our employees access to those critical things, employee-led development, sharing of information, always on feedback for each other and for the business. Not a point-in-time pulse check, but checking that pulse, every single month across every part of the company.
It matures, it evolves, it's real, it's live.
Yeah. And again, it just goes back, you just need to be aware. If you want to push that authentic employer brand through, you've got to know what it is to all the different people within your organization at any one time.
Very good, very good. Glassdoor, you must, Lauren, have visibility on really cool companies doing really cool things and not so cool companies doing not so cool things from an employer branding perspective. Is there any standout company or initiative? I liked what you mentioned, Andrea, around the Virgin piece. That was really, really cool. And again, I never heard that one. They've recently bought UPC, a company here. And again, I think there's a bit of a clash around both of those employer brands for those who know it. And there's probably a bit of a challenge and potential opportunity there. Do either of you see any other companies doing really cool things in this space? Lauren?
Of course, there are companies that do amazing things. When I think about a global organization like L'Oreal that has sort of a power to the people culture. So even when we first started talking, we were so aligned. Rich Barton, who founded Glassdoor, has started a lot of what he calls power to the people companies. So Glassdoor being one of them. So this concept of empowering your people, giving autonomy, and making an employer brand dynamic, where you're constantly getting feedback instead of just stamping your EVP done, to your point, and letting it go. I hear that a lot. Well, we're working on our EVP. We'll talk once we're done with our EVP, but your EVP is alive. It's here today. So it's been remarkable to see employers that are in maybe a more conservative space than L'Oreal, like in the banking industry, who are trying to hire completely different profiles than they were 5 or 10 years ago. And for them to make remarkable strides in their evolution and embracing transparency in an industry that's highly regulated, that's been amazing to see and watch.
Because some companies, it's like the parents trying to use the children's language, isn't it? You know what I mean? Like the words that we probably don't understand as parents, but just to identify and feel that they can identify with a newer cohort. And I'll come to you just for maybe just the final conclusion. What are your top? You had was 5 tips there in terms of what people can do from an employer branding perspective. What do you see as the next phase? So you guys are big on analytics, big on things that are very current and very kind of future focused. What's the next phase beyond what we've just discussed around the employer brand? And where do you see it moving? And what can people in the room do to position themselves?
Yeah, I mean, from a digital standpoint, I see the next phase is a employer branding, which is really highly optimized for a mobile consumption, and that is leveraging big data, to make sure that the employer branding, instead of being a generalistic message, becomes extremely targeted. So on your mobile, the same company will send you a employer branding message,
Yeah.
which would be different from the employer branding message it will be sending to me. And because an employer brand can be very targeted while being consistent, and through the data that Twitter has, Facebook has, the Glassdoor has, if you bring this data all together, I think you can really make sure that the messaging is very targeted. And then I would say, I see messaging technology becoming bigger and bigger, in the sense that it's not by chance that when you are on Facebook and you go on Messenger, Messenger opens in a different way. It's like a separate app. It's integrated in the Facebook app, but you do see that you go into a different environment. And it's because I think companies more and more will try to engage you on messaging platforms, but then also they will entice you to transact. So maybe the airline will send you a message saying your flights has been delayed or has been canceled, and instead of you calling, etc., you are going to immediately be given options of next flights, and then there will be an option you want to transact. And then you can see if in that environment, why not engaging candidates in that way? So where you have more a continuum way of engaging candidates through messaging platform. And the last point I will say is I see a world in which, because of this new collaborative common economy, where we need to become more open source, where Monster will provide access to his 6 Sense technology and access to his data, and Glassdoor will provide access, and everyone will, where the value of the service is in the added value that you'll provide in analyzing the data and in specific services you'll provide, but not in the data itself. We got so much information, and we're all trying to replicate the same things. If instead of replicating that, we all put these together, we can then focus on really can add the most value to customers.
I think we'll leave it at that. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
Cheers.